to order. Please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and I will take roll call of the voting members present. Commissioner Laura Blaney. Here. Councilmember Andy Bozick. Here. And Councilmember Jeremy Rivas.
Here.
And with us also we have our non-voting County Attorney Advisor Scott McClure and myself, Vicki Urbanik, Porter County Auditor. Well, welcome everyone to our steering committee meeting. This is a pretty momentous steering committee meeting because it is the first one following all the hard work that was done by the subcommittees over the past few months. And we're going to get to what the subcommittees ended up doing and where we're going to go from here. But first we wanted to address a few other items of business. On the agenda is the approval of the April 19th minutes. We're going to move that to next week because I need to get those minutes to you and I didn't get them to you yet. So you're meeting next week, so we'll put that on the agenda. Now, the next item that we wanted to just address is what our process is going to be for spending these funds. There's been a few questions about what process will we be following. And so I wanted to go over that regardless of how the end result is going to come out. And I have a little slideshow for you. It's only a few slides. I'll go through this pretty quickly. Porter County's process for spending the American Rescue Plan Award. Basically, everything that I'm going to talk about and all of the processes that we have developed are pretty much rooted in the next slide. The second paragraph I'll read out loud. Your organization must develop and implement effective internal controls to ensure that funding decisions under the SLFRF award constitute eligible uses of funds and document determinations. And this comes straight from the U.S. Treasury's latest version of their compliance and reporting guidance. And while I'm excited to mention this is because just very, very recently, our office has officially approved our internal control policies and procedures document. This will be posted online and we will be updating it as needed, and this is, as you can see, it is a requirement, and we will be audited on our internal controls. And all of this is designed to ensure that we are in compliance so that everyone who spends this money or who has access to this money is carrying out the process properly so that we don't get an audit finding and under the worst case scenario have to repay back some of the funds. So I'm not going to talk about this document that we're very proud of except to kind of go over the process very briefly. So the first slide just talks about some definitions. Who gets to use the SLFRF funds? SLFRF stands for the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, which is a part of ARPA. We, the county, is the recipient of this $33 million federal grant award. And there's no requirement, no obligation for a recipient government to share its allocation with anyone outside of its entity, of its organization. Despite what some people may think or may want to believe, there is no requirement. The county could spend the entire amount on county government functions. But you could also open it up to outside groups. And so who are these outside groups? They fall into two categories, subrecipients and beneficiaries. Now, some of you who may have come to one of those public presentations, some of you are going to say, this sounds familiar. So let me just go over the definitions, the difference between subrecipients and beneficiaries, which is on the next slide. Subrecipients, oh yes, you can see that somewhat. They are, in a sense, an arm of the recipient. They are carrying out an enumerated use on behalf of the recipient. And so all of the award terms and conditions flow down to the subrecipient. So anything that we would have to do as part of winning a federal award, a subrecipient has to do. We are required to quote-unquote manage and monitor subrecipients. So we're going to be developing a relationship with all of our subrecipients. We, at the county level, are subject to what's called the uniform guidance. If you've never dealt with federal awards, you may not know what that means, and some of you have dealt with federal awards. This is a part of the Federal Code of Federal Regulations that addresses federal audits, federal grant audits, and we have to comply with the uniform guidance. These include procurement procedures and conflict of interest rules. And subrecipients are subject to a required risk assessment that we need to conduct. The Auditor's Office has already begun a risk assessment. Now, the difference with subrecipients and beneficiaries, as Treasury tells us, really boils down to who is the end user of the award. The subrecipients are carrying out a project on behalf of the recipient. So let's say that the county wants to do a behavioral health program, and we don't have the staff or the resources to do the program, so we agree that a certain behavioral health organization will carry this out. They will be the subrecipient, and the people who are actually benefiting from those services are the individual beneficiaries. Now, beneficiaries also apply in this context to nonprofits and small businesses and impacted industries under this program if they demonstrate economic harm that was caused or exacerbated by the pandemic. And the response must be reasonable and related and reasonably proportional to that harm. And beneficiaries are not subject to the uniform guidance. However, there's plenty of references saying that the recipient is still responsible for the proper use of all of the awards. So, we will be required to identify everyone as either a recipient, which would be county government, a subrecipient, or a beneficiary for purposes of our reporting. So now, what is that process? Well, the good news is that the process generally is going to be exactly the same regardless of whether you're a recipient, subrecipient, or beneficiary. And I'll just go over this. We have been discussing the process. Like I said, it's all contained in our internal control document. And we recently had a meeting with a group of our first subrecipients, township government. And we talked about the process in general with townships. So let me go over in general. This is very, bird's eye view of it. First off, this is on the next slide, yeah. Projects are going to be reviewed by the Auditor's Office to ensure that it's in compliance with the final rule. We are by no means the final authority. It's just us being the County Auditor's Office to advise the county as to whether we think we're in compliance. We're not the final authority because that will be determined by the examiners who coming to visit us sometime next year. There has to be a written agreement with all subrecipients and beneficiaries, and that will have to be approved by both parties. The written agreements are going to spell out the terms and conditions of the award. Everyone, the subrecipients and beneficiaries will have to submit general documentation. For example, let's say that you contract with a contractor. We'd like that contract. Let's say you're hiring a new staff position. We'd like some documentation that this position actually exists. There may be payroll reports or meeting minutes. Subrecipients, where applicable, will need to demonstrate compliance with the uniform guidance. Like I mentioned before, the Auditor's Office will be conducting a risk assessment, and we will be setting up an internal account for every project. So just like the county officials here, you know how each department has like its own budget. Everyone who gets a part of this award will be set up in our system. We've already set up the townships that way. So instead of dealing with all of our county departments, we're now going to be dealing with who knows how many. And then how are we going to release these claims? The money. We're not just going to write a check. I think I've said that before at other meetings. It's going to really depend upon the project. So what we would like the subrecipients and beneficiaries to do is that when you're ready to purchase the item or pay your contractor or whatever the project is, submit to us the invoice. And you will be submitting an accounts payable voucher. It's not as scary as it may sound. We will provide you the voucher. We will already fill out the budget information, so you don't have to worry about that. But you do have to tell us who are we paying and the date of the invoice and the invoice number. County departments know exactly the process because they follow this all the time. And then, if everything looks good, we will pay that invoice. In some cases, you may want to pay your project costs up front, and then you just submit the documentation to us, and we will reimburse you. In very, very limited situations, we will be advancing the money, and so let's not talk about that until we have to address that. The reason we don't want to advance is because we want the paperwork, the documentation up front. And also, we will be reporting all of these expenditures both on our annual financial report and our quarterly reports that we must submit to U.S. Treasury. And then after all that's done, we all prepare for the audit. And when the audit happens, they will be asking not just for our records, but all subrecipient and beneficiary records. That's why we want to accumulate all these files now. It's going to be easier to do it now than a year from now, when people might change positions or you can't find that invoice or whatever. It happens, believe me. So we need to document everything. It's not as scary of a process. Just talk to any county department. They deal with our office all the time, and it's not scary. But we do ask a lot of questions, and if something doesn't look right, do be prepared to get phone calls from us to give us what we need, because we're actually doing it just to protect the county and everyone participating in the program. Ultimately, it's to protect taxpayers.
No, it's good.
Yes. So that is our.
Scary, but
Pardon me?
it might be a little scary.
Only if someone is trying to fudge something. So basically, we will be trying to, a little bit like audit everyone, and it's just to start that audit file for next year. This is my 8th year of being the auditee as the auditor, and we have already begun our newest audit. And we have a good idea of what the examiners are going to be asking for. So if we ask for meeting minutes, you might think that's a kind of weird question, but they do ask for meeting minutes as part of their audits. So that's why we're just trying to document everything. Our auditor's office has an SLF team established, and we are here to help everyone get through the process well. So that's going to be our process. Now the hard part comes. Who's going to be the participants? So let's move on to the subcommittee. As I mentioned, the subcommittees have finished their work. They met between March 10th and May 23rd. 23 public meetings were held. This was a huge undertaking, a huge endeavor. I know some people came to practically all, if not all, of those meetings, but it was a lot of work. I want to really commend all of the individuals who were part of the process, because this was a huge undertaking and people took it seriously. I have to tell you, I try to talk with every other county that I can, and I ask them their process, and I think it's fair to say the vast majority of them did not do what we did. I know of one that set up a committee and had the public meetings and evaluated proposals. I'm sure there are more, I just happen to know of one. Most, the commissioners have come up with a plan, and some work with the council.
Some didn't.
Some didn't. And then they put the plan in the document, held a public hearing on it, and that was it. And many also haven't even decided what they're doing. They're in the same stage that we are going through the process. So this was a big undertaking. Originally, the 63 applicants totaled $53 million. The subcommittee did cut some projects. The list now consists of 48 projects, and the total comes over to just over $35 million. And so tonight, the subcommittees are, through me, I guess, essentially giving the steering committee all of the scores, all the rankings, and the full listing. And so what I gave you is the rankings by the subcommittee, and then some of the work that we've been doing in the R's office, trying to identify what would be the expenditure category that we would be reporting to Treasury. So this is all tentative, we've got to work through it. Generally, what kind of a project is it? Is it new construction? Is it an expansion of a program? Someone asked for that to get an idea of what it is. So you have the listing. I did email you all the listing.
Vicki,
Yes.
were you guys, are we still planning on having the subcommittee present to us or come
Well,
in front of us? Or is that something we're discussing today?
that's what we're
'Cause I don't see
discussing.
them out there, that's what I'm asking.
I believe there are two subcommittee
Oh, there is,
members
okay.
here,
Right.
not the chairs. I don't see the chairs here. Well, one chair, I see one chair.
It was just a question, I don't know.
And that's something we can talk about. It's
what
all
is the
online,
process?
and I don't know what you guys have watched, but I've paid attention as we're going. I haven't watched every single meeting for sure, but
Yeah, I'm not saying we need it, I just remember we had discussed it at the beginning and that we may do that, and I didn't know if we were still doing that or are we not. And I, like you, had not been able to watch every single one in detail, but
I don't want to repeat what they did. I mean, that was the point, in my opinion anyways, of the subcommittees, to go through everything and weed them out. I gotta be honest,
absolutely was the point when we
Yeah.
put this process together to get, and the members of the public sat on those subcommittees, so I don't want to try to redo their work.
I don't either.
no. So
Just, okay, thank you.
I envisioned our role as we got it going. They did the heavy lifting. It was just brought back to us to finalize and take to the commissioners to put in a plan and for the council to, allocate the money, according to the plan. So,
I will say that we did ask the subcommittee chairs to be here or to send a designee if they couldn't be here. And we do have two subcommittee members here. So I think, or do we have, oh, okay, I thought somebody said, or do we have three?
well, I don't, so I'm not too concerned. We're going to meet next month.
And each of us were on a
We
committee.
have three.
And we did.
We have a member from the infrastructure committee here. So we could ask them for comments or to answer questions
I
if,
think if the need arises.
Yeah.
okay.
If it arises or, if there's questions, we've got next month. I mean, not next month,
Next
next week.
Yep, next week.
So,
So is our process to hopefully get through this today and next week, then refer it up to the commissioners, and then they would vote on it next month? Is that what it was? And then go to the council that same month?
Yep.
Cool.
That'd be helpful.
You have two meetings scheduled, the 23rd and the 30th.
We have a
Well, the
potential on the
30th
30th if we needed
Yeah,
it.
the 30th
We just
is-
yeah.
wanted to make sure the calendar was clear for it if we needed it.
Thank you.
So the timetable going to the commissioners, what would that be?
We
They
have a
meet
meeting
in
the
July,
12th, July 12th,
July 12th.
and then council has their meeting the 4th Tuesday in July.
yeah.
I'm sure
you.
everyone would appreciate us wrapping this up.
Yeah. So,
July, yeah, so that would be the 26th it appears.
I guess just to keep things moving forward, I let the subcommittees do their work, paid some attention to it, but, I thought they would eliminate more, but regardless, they did their job absolutely and brought the scores back. They eliminated some. It's gone, Vicki, from, what'd you say, from,
53 million to 35 million?
yeah, I think.
63 to 48?
Yeah, we started with 63 projects at 53 million, now we're down to 48 projects at 35 million, and they've done their work, they heard them all out, and they scored them. So I worked on this a little bit to figure out how, well, I guess maybe we need to start this way. I mean, just in my opinion, Vicki, I want to keep calling it standard deduction, but
Right.
the allowance.
The allowance.
Revenue replacement, the allowance, that's, for us, a county that's getting more than that, we can choose to just take the $10 million as an allowance, and we can use it for any governmental
Any governmental service, yes.
service.
And you may recall at the last steering committee meeting, we talked about that we would have to tell U.S. Treasury what we were doing. It was a requirement. Basically, are we going to calculate revenue following their calculation, or are we going to claim the one-time allowance? And I claimed the allowance because the calculations following their formula did not come anywhere near 10 million. We are being advised to take the standard allowance. The reporting requirements are a lot more streamlined than going through all of the other process. But it's called revenue loss, but it could also be called flexible use category because it can be used for any government service.
Do you
So-
have a recommendation?
I recommend that we do this. We already claimed it. And we already know that we will have at least one project in the revenue loss category, and to what extent other projects may be in it will really depend on your process. Because there are two projects that I don't know if the word is recommending, but I would take the position that they need to be in the revenue loss category because they don't fit nicely in one of the other expenditure categories.
Are those big numbers that you're talking about? Those two
One
applicants?
is very big, yes. Well, it's relative, what's large, you know.
Over $1 million? I mean, anything's
Yes.
large to me, but.
Yes. No, another reason why I think it's a wise decision for us to opt for this is to safeguard us for the future. We're coming up against budget hearings. We don't know what's going to happen at budget hearing time, except we are getting indications that we will have some new requests coming up, and we're getting indications that our levy growth quotient is going to be much higher than we're used to. That raises a concern for future years, because what happens if we start seeing the projections of a recession coming down the line? What happens if our growth quotient drops next year? We might, from a county government standpoint, end up with not being able to keep our operating balances high. And we have a goal of having our operating balances on all of our funds at least 15 to 20%. And that's just assurances for the future so that we can continue to operate county government. So if we can identify county projects that could utilize this money now rather than depending on taxpayers for it, it's a safeguard for the future, because then our county funds will have time to stabilize and hopefully be there to protect us when and if recessions happen or when and if funding cuts occur. One of the proposals calls for doing just that, which we could get into when we talk about the individual projects. Every county that I have talked to is taking advantage of the revenue loss category. Now, some are, most, I will have to say, did set aside some money for premium pay, and some are giving grants assistance to nonprofits. But the rest is in revenue loss, because the vast majority of our counties in Indiana didn't get more than $10 million. And so they can use their entire allotment for any government service. Now, the larger counties, like us, have to go through a different process, where we have to find those different buckets and expenditure categories.
Vicki, I have a question about that. When we talk about this revenue replacement of 10 million, we're going to approve some projects, I assume. And once we do that, if they're not able to get done by the date, then we're going to claw that money back or not give them that money, and we're going to need to expend it semi-quickly, correct?
Right.
We're going to need that revenue replacement ability, that item to spend it, or we'll be able to find projects that fit within these categories. I mean, what do you, does that make sense? Does my question make sense? Do we need to hold a portion of that revenue replacement, 10 million, to be expended later in case one of these other project doesn't finish?
Well, I think there's two ways of looking at it. If you designate 10 million for revenue replacement, and then let's say there's another project that you approve, let's just say 1 million, and it can't get done or something happens and they never spend that money, then you have another 1 million that doesn't go into revenue loss. It has to go into one of the
Those
other
categories,
expenditure
right.
categories.
So at the last minute, we're kind of trying to
Yeah.
find a place to put that money,
Right.
where with revenue replacement, we would have that flexibility to put
Yes,
anywhere in the
yes.
county.
Right.
I think that's why we set a date too, right?
Yeah, we set a date
We
6
did, we
months
did,
earlier.
right.
Yeah, that kind of forces their hand on.
That's what I'm wondering, if we want to save some of that just in case. Just a question.
I don't think, it seems like it's two different things, that
Well, if
whatever's
you-
not spent, we're forced to use that money that's not spent by any of our sub-recipients. We're still forced to use that within the categories
Yes,
that were
yes.
laid
But we
out
can
by
move
Treasury.
it, correct?
We could
If we
definitely,
had more, say we had 3 million left in the revenue replacement to be able to be expended, we can move that to there real quick and then expend it. I'm just saying it would make it easier for us if we do get in a situation where there's,
Well, also, if we're doing our jobs, and Vicky is, which by all appearances, she absolutely is.
And she loves every minute of
We should be picking
it.
projects that are pretty clearly going to make these targets, unless there's some disaster. I mean, we've got really good projects on this list. I don't,
and we did ask all of the applicants, especially those that have like construction projects, can you meet these deadlines? And everyone said yes. Now, can they really? Because what might happen, we don't know. But everyone feels very comfortable. And that's another reason why there may be the idea of getting this process as done as possible before budget hearings is actually a benefit to some of our applicants. Some are ready to go. And it's just a question of, are we in or are we out? So we're not doing our nonprofits
and
any.
stormwater projects.
And stormwater, we're not doing them any favor by pushing
But
this.
Stormwater's an area that we can always put money into if we need to.
Well,
at
and
the end.
stormwater is an enumerated use.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Right.
If we end up with some money we don't know what to do with, they always have projects teed up.
that's a good point. So we do have that backup.
So I think, yeah, in my opinion, and I don't know how we move forward with this, Madam Chairwoman, but I think we need to start with that $10 million, plucking that out. So I think we walked into this a couple months ago with 30 million, because we had already allocated about 3, roughly. So we were walking into this process with 30 million. Just rough numbers.
It was 4,
Those four.
although part of that 4 has to be in revenue loss. We know that. So we're already going to eat into that 10 million. Now, how much, we don't yet know. And I will try to get that more
Yeah, so just,
fine-tuned.
Do we
With
need
round
to-
numbers.
Do we need to vote on
Right.
using the 10 million for revenue replacement? What do you think?
Yeah.
That would be part of your recommendation to the commissioners and then ultimately the council.
well, I'll begin that process, so I think that's gonna help us as we move forward with the rest of what's potentially available. I'll make a motion that we take advantage of the revenue replacement, the allowance of the $10 million.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Well, the further discussion would
further
be,
discussion.
that
Sorry.
just, I'd hate for us to say, okay, you know, we're in such great shape, let's just give out $30 million, and then the next 2 years, we find ourselves in a position where, oh, there's this project, or this came up, and we're searching for money, and we handed $30 million out the door, and we can't do projects with our own doors, and, you know, and it's stuck. You're seeing what, as Vicky said, the auditor said, all the other municipalities and units of government are using it, you know,
And we know
for
we've got
themselves.
inflation right now, and we know we need to pay our employees more. I mean, when this salary study comes back, that's probably gonna, I mean, we're already struggling to hire people. And I know we probably won't use this money for that, but as a county.
But it could free other things up, yeah. So-
It's potentially a question of be smart now or pay later. It's just a matter of long-term fiscal planning
Yep.
and trying to maintain those operating balances in our various funds.
That's just my thought, that I don't think we should send all the money out the door and spend the next couple of years trying to find money to do county government functions. So,
And paving. They'll probably take some of that gas tax off, I would guess, if these gas prices stay up, so the state, we really need that money. I mean, that'll end up hurting the,
State has a surplus, they could send us some.
we'll have to make that call.
It
Yeah.
was interesting, we just handled settlement just this past
Yeah, right.
week. And we noticed that excise distributions were down for many units.
Yeah.
And you would think it would have been up, but that's,
Well, that'll affect,
yes.
community crossing grants.
So any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? Okay, so that motion passed. Now, you'll still have to identify what projects to fund out of that. There'll still need to be an appropriation from the county council. All you did just now is say, we want to designate that amount for revenue loss. It would be similar to saying, we want to designate this amount to infrastructure or
Right.
this amount to behavioral health.
I
Yeah.
think we all get that.
yeah, that
Okay.
stuff will work, the council
Yep.
will work with
And we need
commissioners.
final numbers from her too, because she said something was slipping out of there, so.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Possibly.
So then, in just round numbers, to me, that leaves like roughly $20 million really, is what's kind of. 19, 20 that's left in the,
Depends on what you do with some of these other projects.
well, what I'm saying is we walked in with 30 million, because
We've
we
already
already,
allocated some,
Yeah.
and now we just
Took
out
10 off the
10.
top, so-
So
Right.
what's left?
so 20, roughly 19 to 20 million. So.
Yes.
I mean, we're just using round numbers, you can dial everything in for us, right?
Yes,
So-
yes.
I did some work last night, and I'll hand this to you guys, trying to figure out how to use the,
Do you have one for?
Yeah.
Okay, all the way down.
I gave yours earlier, try to use the subcommittee's information that they provided. They scored everything. So what I did, this is just a suggestion. You gave us all their scores. I just took all their scores, added them together, and divided them by the number, and I found the median. And I drew a line at the median. This is using their scoring methods. This is using where they thought their priorities was. They scored them. We should listen to them. I drew the line right where that median score was. And the ones above it are the ones that move on, the ones below it that don't.
So this is the average.
The average is the number on the right, the top right, which, you know, for instance, in infrastructure, I just added them all together. There was 11 projects. I divided it by 11. The median score was 45.02. I drew the line, you know, right wherever that was, and everything above is what I would say they clearly is where they drew their line in their scoring. Then, you know, for instance, and that takes infrastructure and facilities, it takes it down from 11 projects to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and from 11.2 million to 6.5 million. So on this worksheet, I did that on every category, every subcommittee. I added them together, divided them by the projects, drew the median line, and that was it. After doing that, the projects that are left are 32 projects that equal $20.7 million. That's just being objective to what the subcommittees did, using their numbers and their scoring, and it,
This process makes a lot of sense to me. My only
Now, to me, in my thought is it gets us in the ballpark.
Drop-offs are right about where they seem to be naturally occurring.
Right, yeah, for sure. I mean, the first, where that worked out was the infrastructure and facilities. There was a project, everything above that line is 50, 52, 53. The one below it is 33. I mean, it completely drops off.
That was one committee where you could really see.
See yeah.
You could really, really see it.
I mean, to me, this is, in my thought, this is respecting what they did. We tasked them with something. They brought us their information back, and we're using the information to whittle it down to what we may have available.
I think it makes a lot of sense the way you broke it down. I have some questions about some specific ones, but that's neither here nor there.
And this is maybe where we get into it then, is if we think this is this was kind of their intention, this is where we can draw the line. It's certainly not the final.
Let's ask, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if we did this, what out of these would be in the revenue replacement category?
Okay, that's what I'm looking at.
Well, that's what we'd
right
have
now.
to then send
I
her
was just
back and maybe
wondering,
meet next, that's,
Oh, it looks like she's doing it right now.
Yes, I am trying to do that. Okay, let me just get something here. So
I'm just wondering if that 20 number is a little low.
one of the projects, I'll start with the big one. It's one that I presented. It's not really for the auditor's office, but it was for the county. And this is in the county COVID-19 response, and it's the county health insurance fund. And that is above your line. But now we can move that out of there and put that in revenue loss. The reason why is because our determination is that we can use that COVID-19 health expenditure category only for increased costs due to COVID-19 care. We want to try to zero in on all of our health insurance claims and see if we could get that number. But in the event that we can't get that detail of our health insurance claims over the past year or so, the rest of it, we want to use this to stabilize our health insurance fund.
Well, I'm going to be able to get you the difference between pre-COVID and COVID. I'm fairly confident that we saw a pretty good increase in our claims after the initial nobody can go to the doctor stage was over.
True.
So
True.
I'm not saying it was $2 million of difference, but there was a significant difference. But whatever information you would need after the meeting
Okay.
from the health insurance, we can get from our
That would be
people.
good. So part of that would go into revenue loss, part of it would stay in this big pool.
Okay.
And at this point in time, I mean, the revenue loss and what Vicki is doing for some of these projects is, I don't want to necessarily say it's the cart before the horse, but if they don't make the cut now, then the exercise that she may or may not be going through is not really necessary at this point. So I think you guys are doing the best you can in a hard situation, so.
And the reason I was asking is because Laura mentioned it was only 19 left, and this was over, closer to 21, or
Right.
2.1. That's why I was, or 21, exactly.
Yeah, the numbers will have to dial down a little bit between today and next week, or the next couple of weeks, but to me, it really gives us a ballpark if we use the numbers they gave us, we found that median, it draws us really close if we draw those lines and just.
And maybe just as a suggestion, if you start with just the first one, the infrastructure and facilities, and decide whether or not that's where you want to draw the line just for today to get to next week, if that's where you think the line should be, whether or not it's a couple of projects down or up or whatever it may be, and then just kind of go category by category, and then that way, you have an idea, because I don't think this is all happening tonight, but I do think trying to make a big step here towards next week is, and the infrastructure committee is the one that has the largest change in the middle of the scoring. I mean, we go from 50s to 30s, and that's where the line ended up being. So I think that one's kind of the clear example of at least the strategy you're utilizing at this point to make decisions on awarding.
And I apologize, Mike, I got question marks on there. Those were my kind of notes. I just made some copies when I got here. You know, some of my questions, but I was just trying to
And
think.
just for everybody knows, he's just looking at the scoring sheet of each committee, along with,
Which, this is online, right, Vicki?
We have
No,
those.
it's not, because we wanted to present it to you first. And
So we'll get this on.
I would like direction from the steering committee, is this to go online? Now, all of these numbers were announced at the subcommittee meetings, and if you came to them and you took pictures, I know there's people in the audience who have it already, so.
this is just all put together on one sheet of paper.
Correct.
basically.
It's just taking what each subcommittee did and compile it all together.
And there might be, so some, like, again, just from, yeah, I think I came up with the 32 at 20.7. We'll have to figure out the exact number of what we
Right.
may have available. And it doesn't mean that, to me personally, the subcommittees had a say and they voted. I just took their work, played with it, drew the lines, just trying to be fair and completely, objective, but I still think I get a final vote on the council and I'm up here, this is my time, I'm gonna maybe look at a project or two and maybe, bring it up. It doesn't, so I'm gonna use this opportunity also for that, and I hope that we all do.
And to add on to that, each committee only looked at a certain set of projects, so, and then they voted on things relative to each other and said, which your averages of each committee handle that apples and oranges problem. But I think it's up to the steering committee and the commissioners and council to decide, what do we think the county should be spending this money on? And if there's a stray project, or we would need more projects from one category than another, that might, that's what we need to figure out to recommend.
So with that, building off of that, Laura, there's a little number that I circled on here, and I then, that's the order of who's getting the most money, which subcommittee or which category, and just right now, the nonprofit and employers, they're number one with 7.3 million. The second category, just using this math, the formula, is infrastructure and facilities at 6.5. Then it would be county COVID response 3.7, and behavioral health and social services at 3.1. Just kind of the way the math worked. But I just wanted to offer something to keep it moving forward, to use what they did and take a couple steps forward, to not redo their work, to not disrespect the time they spent.
So I would like to recommend to get this process online before our next meeting, so people can look at it, reflect on it if they want. Maybe we should vote on whether or not to use this as a baseline and get it online. And draw some lines with each committee tonight.
I like that, it's transparency, we need to get it out there and let them digest it, give them a week to look into it. And I like where you started, Jeremy, I think that was good thinking. I don't
So,
compliment you much.
No, you don't ever, you just,
You get one.
So I would just pick a committee and pick one of the
Let's start with
subcommittees and just
infrastructure and
go through it.
facilities. It's there on top, it's
Okay.
an easy one.
these are on the order as they voted. So infrastructure was the first subcommittee that actually ranked and scored their projects, and that's how they were, because I just kept putting them on the spreadsheet. So,
Okay, so when Jeremy added these 11 projects scores together and divided them by the number of scores to get the mean, he ended up with a score of 45.02. Below that line is Blackhawk Beach that scored a 33, Isaac Walton League that scored a 32.2, Indiana Dunes Tourism that scored a 27.6, and Kettle Lake that scored a 26. Everything above the line which is the flood reduction systems, failed stormwater systems, Shorewood Forest stormwater, Corner County Ag /Expo, Shirley Hines Stormwater Partnership, Porter County Conservation Trust, and the Pleasant Township trustee scored a 50 or higher. So this one was pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, you can tell we're in it, the math worked where they cut it off, it seemed like.
Yeah, it's a pretty big drop.
I do want to say that with the Pleasant Township project, I will be recommending that that be moved into revenue loss. So that eats into the revenue loss category by that amount, $150,000. But then it frees up the $150,000 in these other areas, if that's how we want to look at it.
Yeah, and that's something I suppose that between our attorney, between both boards, we might debate you once in a while on some things. I see you getting frustrated over there. Did you just roll your eyes at me, Vicki?
No, I did not.
We're not going to shove everything, and this is just me. I'm not going to jump to shove everything in revenue replacement because you think it may have barely crossed, what you interpret.
Yes.
So.
Okay, if,
And this is why I'm encouraging us to not get into the revenue replacement discussion tonight, because it is complex, and I'm not even sure all the dust is settled, but I think to get back to the infrastructure and facilities, whether Pleasant Township trustee needs to be revenue replacement or not, I think the biggest question tonight is it above or below the line?
Let's draw the lines
yes,
tonight.
okay, let's do that.
So,
I could be proven wrong, that's fine.
So
I don't think
State board says you're wrong every year.
This committee may have an easy line to draw, the rest of them may or may not. So to be as part of the exercise, I would think, because I think we're going to go through it with the next, is there any of the projects that are above the line that any of the steering committee has a particular issue with? Is there any projects below the line that anybody, voting member on the committee would like to either try to bring them, back into contention or need additional information? And then I think we just repeat that as we go through the committees with the hope of potentially getting it sized down before the next meeting.
As we look at it over the week, we may see a project we want to bring above or, right? I mean,
We can
do
discuss that,
over the week.
yeah.
But if there's one today, that's great. To me, this one's pretty cut and dry. The scores drop off drastically at this exact point. So I would make a motion to use the 45.02 score as the break
Second.
for the Infrastructure and Facilities Committee.
Second.
And so the crowd knows that is a total of $6,554,513 total from that committee. If we end up going with this group of projects. And Jeremy's math is right.
I was just going to say, I might have had a Corona when I was doing the math, so you might want to double check.
We'll double check, absolutely.
Vicki will double check you, don't
These are
worry.
ballpark numbers.
So who's always wrong?
She was waiting.
No, yeah, we'll double
Who's
check.
always wrong?
All right.
Okay.
You guys
So
will be
any
all
other
warmed up for
motion?
budget time, that's all I can say.
Do we have a did somebody second?
I did.
Andy seconded. So is there any further discussion? Okay, the motion is made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed. Okay, so you have your first unofficial set of recommendations. Well, actually, second. Revenue loss and now infrastructure.
Okay.
Now we get into the easy ones.
It tightens up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so the next section is behavioral health and social services. Do you want to go through how you summarized it before? Or do you
Sure,
want to
I can do that. Again, assuming Jeremy's math is correct, the average score here was 45.93, and below the line was Valparaiso Women's Association at 45.2, Family Promise at 42.2, Carrying Place at 40.8, and Porter County Community Foundation at 40.2. Above it was Housing Opportunities, Phase 1 and 2, 46.2, Porter Stark Services, 47.2, PACT at 47.8, Project Neighbors, 49.6, and Gabriel's Horn, Portage and Center Township at 54.2. And it comes to a total of $3,100,000.
Well, can I bring up something on that one?
Absolutely.
You guys doing numbers? I know the Caring Place had contacted me. They were concerned because they felt they were scored low because one of the members of that committee didn't have the answers available that they're pretty public about, pretty easily to give out, how many beds are available, stuff like that. So they might have been scored a little low on there, is my belief. And I think we should look at possibly helping them out and possibly the Valpo's Women's Association because they're looking for $80,000 for some great things they're going to be doing. So two of my thoughts.
So I think this is the good part of the process here that, somebody, I'd be more than willing to look into, those two. So.
And I'm not saying we have to go the full amounts, obviously. I'd like to keep them in contention personally.
So what do you think the best approach is with like that, Scott, Laura? I mean.
Well, if the voting members want to take everything above that line, 45.93 to move forward to next week, plus one or two, that's why I was using the example. The easier one is if there's one or two that we want to either we have more questions about or you have more questions about that you need answered or you want some additional time, you could pick one or two or more and pull them forward to next week's meeting, and we're still funneling down, but that's, I think, the easiest and fairest approach at this point for everybody.
So is that maybe,
We can look at these, absolutely. I think we should take them under consideration. The Women's Club just barely, or Valparaiso Women's Association just barely missed the cutoff. Carrying Place missed it by a lot. I mean, they got 40.8 out of 60, so it wasn't a high score, but if that's one you want to look more at.
Yeah, if you guys don't mind, and if you guys maybe want to watch that meeting, you can gather a little more info that may or may not help understand where that score came from, and maybe I'm way off.
okay. So maybe I make a motion that we move on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects above the median, and that we dig into the Valparaiso Women's Association, the Caring Place at next meeting. We do some further research. They kind of stay considered, and I'll do some research, and we do a little more research on those two out of that. But for sure, move the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That'll be my motion to move the 6 projects above at $3.1 million, that are above the median at 45.93, with the consideration of the Women's Association and the Caring Place.
Second your motion?
And you seconded
I
it.
second.
Okay, so any further discussion? There be no further discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. So the motion passed. Okay. And now we get down to the county COVID-19 response. This is one where there was only one project that really fell off the cliff. All the others are, they're
Relatively close.
they're,
They're
yeah,
on top of each other.
right.
I
Yeah.
did notice the line that we're looking at, not the public, is a little off on this one.
Is it? Did I move? Oh, I think you're right.
That must have been the last one you did after that corona.
It should be moved up to,
Should've moved up a little.
yeah,
Oh, that's,
you're right. So thank you.
Was that
We
370?
appreciate you doing your math on the side. It allows us to see the rest of your error.
I showed my work, so yeah, I'm sorry, teacher. I did.
So you guys,
Okay.
based on what you're saying, that would drop the commissioner's AV upgrades, civic HR, and the jury room TVs?
Yeah,
Yeah, because the average is a 49.82,
correct.
so that would put it, everything above the line would be what? Commissioner, civic media, auditor on up.
Yep. So I apologize.
Okay.
I liked where that line was at personally. I mean, it did capture those AV upgrades. Those are important, especially if something like COVID hit again, where we had to meet at home and, or have members that weren't able to attend the board meetings. I personally liked where that line was, even though the math was off.
Well, I
I
think,
agree.
I think to stay consistent, though, we should put the line back to where it was, and then if we want to add
Yep.
things below the line, like we did in
Yeah.
the behavioral, then we can do the same
Well,
type
yeah,
of situation.
the
Yeah.
line should be where the average
Follow the
is.
math, yeah. Yep.
So, the average score with 12 projects is 49.82 out of 60. And,
Gotta help on that.
above that line was health department remodeling at 58.4.
I like that.
EMA enclosed trailer, 56.4. The county health insurance fund, 53.8. The commissioner's civic optimized, 53.2. The auditor's transfer books, 52.2. And the commissioner's civic media, 50.8. And for the crowd, the civic things are website related. So they would be upgrades to our website, which became pretty popular during COVID. Below the line is the IT in the jury room, the TVs at 49.6. The jury room was expanded because of COVID, and this would take care of the visual audio equipment in there. 49.6 was the IT commissioner's AV upgrades in here, which would allow people at home to be able to see the people who are speaking to us, their face while they're speaking to us. Right now, it's just one camera in the back, and you see the back of our presenters' heads, and you see us from pretty far away.
And it's not live. Yeah, I think that's, are you guys gonna go live with it too?
That's my understanding, it would
Well,
allow
this is IT, but yeah, this
To
will
make it
allow.
work, you need the upgrades to the chambers, part one. The civic media module is that we produce it in here, it's broadcast through civic media.
Good, that made the line.
Two-piece thing, yeah. Yeah, so it's, yeah. we
It'll just
kinda
make a
need the
better
upgrades to
experience
make
at
it work.
home.
Yeah,
You'll be able
it
to hear people. You'll be able to see people. Then we've got the, which one was that? Okay.
Sorry.
HR
No,
commissioners.
those are good
You
questions.
were
The
at-
HR commissioners,
right.
civic HR, that's also got a 49.6, so all three of those got a 49.6. The EMA Operations Center laptops was right behind those with a 48. And then the Porter County Library Outdoor Learning, right on the heels of that one at 47.6. And the EMA Deployment Tent, 28.6. So this median actually fell right in the middle of the group. But I personally would like to bring up those audio, all the IT stuff. But I'd also like to continue to consider the library outdoor learning center. That the libraries were used so much during COVID, and this would allow for outdoor Wi-Fi for all the libraries like Valpo has right now in
And-
the park.
I don't know if the full steering committee knows about those, what happened with the library project.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
Okay, so during the subcommittee, there was some discussion about whether the library could chip in some of the costs by using their rainy day fund. And the library at first said that they would not do so. So the subcommittee dropped down the request from their original request to $750,000, and that's what's on your list there. And their original request was, I'm trying to find it.
$1 million?
Yeah.
It was $1 million.
I believe so, yeah. So they dropped it down to 750,000. Literally, that same night was a library board meeting. And the library board then decided that they would chip in part of their own costs. I have a letter that was given, that they would provide $140,000 from the rainy day fund, and they would further cut it down to $700,000. So on the list that you have, Jeremy, you have what the subcommittee voted on, and then on the larger audit master list that we're working on, I cut it down to 700,000.
Well, and I
I'm
went-
not sure what the steering committee, what number the steering committee would want to use, but that's what the library board.
700 for sure.
Okay.
And I think this, this was the committee that I chaired, and when we voted on this, we thought they were not willing to put any skin in the game. And they not only did that, they reduced their ask. So I think it would have scored higher had we known that information when we voted on it.
That was one of those unusual ones.
Was that a motion? Did you,
So are we gonna,
Just discussing.
just how- okay.
separate. Yeah.
I don't believe there's a motion yet. Well,
I did not make a motion.
okay.
so
There's no motion on that.
of these IT things, the IT jury room, I know that's separate, but commissioners, AV upgrades, IT, civic HR. Kurt, did you say one of these are like a second component of upgrading this?
Civic media module, which I think is above your.
It's above it, yeah. Okay.
Along with the Commissioner AV upgrades, those two are kind of in tandem.
Tied.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, not completely, but to Andy's question about, specifically about meetings, they would be combined.
And as far as the laptops go for EMA, I mean, this is my committee, so I'm not trying to get all of it, but the laptops they're using were donated 9 years ago, and they can't upgrade them anymore, so we may want to consider that because they are busy during times like pandemics.
Can I ask, the auditor's transfer books?
Yes.
Oh, I can ask?
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What?
Okay, what is that project?
Yes, please.
You may remember that the recorder a few years ago digitized all of his books. And what that means is that people from the public can look it up online. They don't have to come into the office. I have been wanting to do the same thing with our transfer books. Our transfer books are in use every single day by members of the public. And during COVID, we had to restrict people coming into, well, for part of the time, we didn't even have the building opened. And so then when we reopened, we restricted the use of the transfer books to only one person at a time. It's a pretty small space that they have to look through. But this would help members of the public to do the transfer book research without having to come into our office and use the books. So they would be able to access it through a online process. I did say during the committee that I do have other funds that I could use towards this cost.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, no, I don't think that this is the cost. I'm guessing that this is about half the cost. I haven't sought proposals yet because I would openly bid it or seek open quotes for it. So I haven't done that yet, but based on what the recorders cost, that's what I'm basing this on.
Okay. No, I figured, and I was gonna ask that question, so, but it makes sense too, because that was, geez, wasn't that $800,000, the record?
It was close to 700,000.
Yeah,
I
so.
have it here. so-
Okay, that's all right, Vicki. To follow up on the health department remodeling, I got a phone call, it was a couple weeks ago, and the health department said they were getting money from the state. Another, I don't know if it was more money the state was just sitting on, but they were getting more COVID money. Are you aware of that at all?
Was it per shot that they gave out, vaccination they gave out?
Was,
Is that, because I heard about extra money coming in for
Yeah.
that, because it was per shot they gave out or something.
so I'm not entirely certain. I'm just asking because if it's
If they
$3
could
or
use
$4
that
million,
money,
yeah, and if it's got restricted uses, you know, could they use that? Maybe it was only $1 million, but if it's 3 or 4 million, or could they use that? Because that would free up too, and the reason I'm asking a few of these questions is if we want to dip below the line, if we just use,
Well, no, they're not, but could I call my helpline?
Absolutely.
Could Tony come up here? Could you explain that?
Yeah, they contacted them not long ago, saying they're getting a little bit
I
more money
can't,
from
can you?
us.
You need to come up. Please identify your, no,
And your address?
and your address, please.
It's all, they called me not long ago saying they were getting a little bit more money from the state, but it's not gonna be a whole lot. It sounds like it's just a little bit, and I think they have specific deliverables associated with that. It really has to do with vaccination,
It's restricted for
education and
that
stuff.
project.
It is not like free money like they were giving out in the beginning of COVID, where it's like whatever you needed to, to meet the needs of your office. That's not what this is. It's
Okay.
really a rather small amount, and again, specific deliverables.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
So that's all. I'm just looking at some of these to say if we wanted to, because above the line, everything above the line comes in at $20 million. So we're pretty much teetering on that amount. So if there's ones that we could pull off, maybe it allows us to pull up the outdoor library, the carrying place, if we're working to free up but maybe that's the work we have to do. So I'll just to continue on this path I'll make a motion to approve everything above the median line, the 49.82. But on this one, I'd like us to definitely consider all of them down, because the real drop-off was,
The deployment tent?
the deployment tent. So,
That project was not
yeah.
appreciated.
So I want to,
I mean, it's,
Apparently.
I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
bad, it just didn't fit as well as
Yeah.
everything
Right, you can
else.
see, yeah.
so I want to pass along, moving forward, everything for sure, that's above the median line, and then I want to bring back for sure and consider everything below, from the IT jury room to the library.
I'll second that.
Okay, so motion is made by Jeremy and seconded by Laura. Let's have some further discussion. Can I clarify? What is the median line? Is it the one that you gave here, or?
No, it's the true one, the 49.82, yeah.
So we're moving up the line?
It, just put it where it belongs. I mean,
So-
Okay,
yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
clarify.
because I think what we're saying is, for sure, that's moving along, that we don't need to discuss anymore, maybe, is everything above? And
I
then,
don't think you guys have gotten that far yet, but I think,
yeah,
the way I understand the motion is the same way we did the
Yeah.
first two committees.
That's
gotcha.
what we're gonna consider.
Okay,
when we
very good.
think about
I
it.
just wanted to do that. However, do keep in mind that $2 million for the health insurance, part of that will be moved into the other category.
Are you back to the other category?
The whole
The
price?
one that we're
Spending
not
that 10
talking
million.
about. So
Stay
this
out
is
of
going
it.
to
We're done with
affect the
that
total.
We're done with that one, Vicki.
I'm with
And
you.
we will try to fine tune those
Call
numbers.
the question, Madam Auditor.
Okay. So is there any other discussion?
No.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? And so that motion passes. And now we get to the Nonprofit and Employers Subcommittee.
I think your math is correct on this one, Jeremy.
Yeah. And the line's in the right place too.
Please check it all.
The median in this, or I'm sorry, the mean in this one is 43.95. And the things that fell below the average were Nana Claire's Kitchen at 43.6, Valparaiso YMCA 36.8, Liberty Township Fire Department 34.8, Dressed for School 34.2, and Porter County Project Kids at 24.6. You remember all these scores are out of 60. Then above it, we had Coffee Creek Watershed Conservancy Boardwalk 44.8, Kid Funds Corporation, 45. Neighbors Educational Opportunities, 46.4. Boys and Girls Club of Greater Northwest Indiana, 46.8. Community Theater Guild, 46.8. Coffee Creek Watershed Conservancy, revenue loss, 46.8. Hilltop Neighborhood House, 48.2. VNA Hospice of Northwest Indiana, 48.6. Shirley Hines Land Trust, 51.4. The Mac Foundation, 51.4. And Opportunity Enterprises at 53.
And that total is,
$7,345,419. I personally, where did,
Andy? Yeah.
I looked down, he was gone.
At his restaurant.
You can ask
We're
for a
not
break.
taking a break.
I didn't know, sorry.
All right, so we just went over what's above and below the line.
The line didn't move.
The line didn't move, you have it in front of you. To me, this line makes sense. There's nothing I personally want to bring up from below the line. But I think, it seems like a natural break.
Some large ass in this one.
There are, and my thought was, this is the bigger ask group besides stormwater, which is, pretty, I don't know how many projects are within that, but and I know the county health insurance, but we're not sure on that, but these are the ones that you're getting into 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.1. If there's one sitting below the line, one or two sitting below a line, and it means pulling, one or two up, and we potential to reduce, one of these $1.5 million asks down a little bit, because those are big asks. It's a lot of money that we're handing out. So,
Is there anybody here from this committee?
Yes. Ruth.
Were these organizations asked if they could take lesser amounts?
Yes, they were. And some did ask for lesser amounts. I don't get my file with me, so I can see everything else did. But, they were all asked if they'd take less money, and I think they all said yes. And some of them, in fact, did reduce the amount that they originally asked for.
So maybe these numbers that came forward were already reduced?
Yeah.
Like some of them are, you can see them
Yes.
on here.
Now, for the steering committee,
I have my paper in
I gave you which ones the
Hey, Laura,
groups reduced.
Commissioner, excuse
I
me.
think that we all.
They're on here, which one's reduced? The MAC went down from 3.3 to 1.5, for example.
Oh, okay.
That way you don't have to remember them.
Yeah.
Some of these numbers have already been reduced.
Yes.
Not all of them, though. Some of
Not
them.
all of them.
There's
but
only
some of them did decide.
handful.
Once you sent out questions, right, to some of them, then when they presented, they reduced their original ask.
Right. I think we're talking
Big
two
ones,
different
yeah.
things. The numbers that you have here is what the subcommittee scored, and some of them were reduced.
The subcommittee, I think, reduced
Okay.
some on our own.
Yes, the subcommittee reduced some, and some of the groups reduced those. And I have a list of which ones reduced, like voluntarily,
Right.
and then which ones you guys took the.
Oh, that's two different tables. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see what you're doing.
I see.
Well, like for instance, the Opportunity Enterprise request was reduced by the subcommittee. The MAC Foundation was reduced by the subcommittee. Shirley Hines Land Trust was the applicant reduced.
Right.
So,
Hilltop reduced,
But the
and
numbers-
Neighbors Educational Opportunities also reduced.
but the numbers we're looking at are whether they're reduced by the subcommittee vote or reduced by the applicant.
They've
These-
already been reduced.
They've been reduced.
That what you're
To this
looking at
stage.
was reduced. No matter who did the reducing.
Right.
So are you saying that we couldn't reduce more than that? They couldn't complete their projects?
I think we probably could reduce
Well, no, I get that, because they complete their projects. I was asking if that was part of the comment. I'm sorry.
Well, we asked the question to each person, each group, you know, would you accept less than what you're asking for? And they all said yes.
But I think to Andy's point, I think that's a good point.
It is.
If it's a, and I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I can rattle off all of these projects, but if it's a construction-based or a purchase-based request for some certain, they may or may not have the flexibility of a reduction. If it's programming or something that's not a purchase or a construction project, they may have more flexibility and the ability to take less. So I think that's a good question, and I think that's part of, again, if we can, we get through tonight, we get to next week, we can then see that during this week, okay, this is the field that's left over, you know, maybe then we can have Vicky or Kurt or myself or whoever go back through this list and project or not, to try to get you that determination between the two, and then you can have it available for next week's meeting for further with the funneling.
And we started putting that data together in the big sheet. This is, I'm calling it the auditor sheet. Is it a new program? Is it an expanded program? Is it a construction project? Is it offset revenue loss? And some have combinations.
So I'll make a motion that we move on all the projects, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The 11 projects above the mean. I guess I need to figure out what the difference between median and mean is. Laura keeps correcting me.
Sorry. I liked math.
Mean is average.
Mean is average.
I don't,
Median is exactly in the middle.
These numbers.
All right, so the mean,
Those are the expenditure category. I started taking the position, what if all of these were approved? Can I find that proper expenditure category?
Thank you.
So that's why I call this the auditor list.
so, for everyone out there, on the auditor list that Vicky's referring to, it's the same projects and the scoring and the amount asked for and whether it's subcommittee reduced or not. And then within, as she's starting to do her auditor work, where would this fit into the categories within the ARP itself? So I believe that's what Andy was asking, what these, the expenditure category line is, and that's what, just so everyone knows what we're looking at. So in this category would be, you know, opportunity enterprises, would be assistance to nonprofits, Shirley Hines Land Trust would be travel and or hospitality and or aid to tourism. That's the work of the auditor dealing with the actual ARP
So
categories.
once you make the determination, would it actually say like revenue replacement or whatever that fund would be called? That's where you would know what, I'm not asking you what's going in there.
It would be which category in the ARP, in the American Rescue Plan guidance, which of the categories it's fitting in according to her, so it's set up so that the proper audit procedures are being followed.
Thank you, guys.
This is like US Treasury.
Okay, that's all I was wondering.
so my motion was to move forward everything above the 43.95 mean.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Further discussion?
I think this is we've gotten a lot of pushback over the years with the sale of the hospital and the hospital proceeds and what we've done with it and invested it and been able to keep people's taxes low in this county. This is a great opportunity for us to give money out to the nonprofits around this county, and it's no small amount. You know, this alone right here, this category, if we just stay where it's $7.3 million. You know, so, you know, we've had a lot of people, you know, knocking on the door, so we've had to balance, you know, not raising taxes, keeping taxes low, and you know, not digging into, you know, the foundation, the principle and stuff, and we've done some great things with it. So I think this is a good opportunity for the county to you know, extend our hand and give out some money to nonprofits in the county. And it's not something that seems to be happening in Northwest Indiana, around the state, according to you. There's
Well,
not a lot.
maybe some of the logic is the way the foundation and the hospital proceeds have been handled, it allows us to be in a position to potentially give
Exactly.
away $7 or $8 million to non-for-profits, and maybe that's part of the reason why only at least one out of the other 92 counties are, so there's 2 of us doing this, so I think part of it is we're in a position to be able to potentially give away $7.3 million, and that has to do with, a lot of that has to do with how the hospital foundation and those proceeds have been invested and protected, so.
Yeah, and it's really more than that. I know some of these fall within county government responsibilities, but, just outside of that that 7.3, you look at Gabriel's Horn, Project Neighbors, housing opportunities, it really climbs. I mean, we really truly could be giving out to, over $10 million, if, plus to nonprofits in this county.
Absolutely. Right now, this would be the single biggest category, although there'll be some others that you might be bringing up, moving
Right.
around. Plus, the behavioral health is also nonprofit, heavy nonprofit.
Yeah.
So is there any other further discussion?
So for next week, what,
Have we voted?
I don't believe we
Oh, I'm
voted on the
sorry.
motion.
I forgot.
Aye.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed. Okay, motion passed. And I don't know what you were going to say. Go ahead,
I was
Laura.
just gonna say for next week, what questions do we have that we need to get answered between now and then?
Yeah, I would just encourage us to go right back, does the infrastructure and facilities, I mean, we didn't bring anything below the line up. Is there anything on that committee that anyone needs in this next week, would want to have present here for next meeting? Those type of things, and we're just gonna keep going through the committee, so then that way, just trying to put ourselves in the best circumstance to be able to move forward next Thursday.
Yeah. I'm okay at this point in time. If my phone rings and something happens, then, we'll communicate.
How
But
about with the behavioral health and social services? Those 2, we did pull 2 from below the line.
I think
Is there
We should
additional
have
information,
The
or
committee chair here, I would think, right, or the
we can request a committee
subcommittee
chair?
chair?
Or
Is that the best way to
Yeah.
go? Just get the answers from him, they listen to or her, I don't know who it was, but.
that was big.
It was Jim.
Behavioral
Yeah.
health, Commissioner Biggs, yes.
So yeah, maybe ask him,
That'd be good.
to be here.
How about for the COVID response? You want, maybe have IT here present?
Yeah, IT, that's mostly all that, and, maybe the library,
Yeah.
Okay, so IT, Kurt, and library for
Yeah.
this one?
dive into
I will
that.
say, when we were talking about behavioral health, we do have a behavioral health committee member here.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask her any questions now? Wait till next week?
No, because I kind of want to, I'm hoping that they'll kind of check out the video and gather their own opinion of what happened in that meeting. It's not, they don't have to watch the whole video, but if they could just watch the clips.
In fairness, I'm not sure she was prepared to come up and explain the carrying place just today, so. But next Thursday,
We'll put you on spot.
if Commissioner Biggs can't be here, he can send a designee, but then that gives that person an opportunity to be ready to go back, watch, look at their notes, the scoring and things like that, to be prepared to answer some questions.
Okay.
All right, and then on the non-for-profits and employers, information or people?
I think right now, no, but I suppose that's something, in my opinion, that maybe, because if, I'm hoping Vicky goes and rechecks all my math, please, and then maybe gives us an indication of, with that 10 million gone,
Well, before you get to that, I think one thing you do want here is whether these are projects or programming, right? Before the next meeting, so that, because I think when we got to the idea of whether or not these were gonna remain the same or potentially be reduced, one of the questions was whether or not they could be. So unless we have them all here, to answer that question, I think the subcommittee, Ruth has communicated back that they all said they could reduce, but I think to Andy's point, whether it's a construction or a purchase or a programming type of situation, obviously changes that. So I think internally, we can go back through and figure out the difference between projects and programming and things like that. I think that would potentially help the group for next Thursday.
yeah. Yeah, for sure, because I don't want to, I want to send forward the best we can to the commissioners that really, the numbers aren't you know, that we really maybe came in slightly below what we have. So if we can work those numbers and Vicky comes back and says, hey, you really only have 18 million, we're gonna have to do some moving around to figure out how to get maybe the library, the carrying, or whatever.
We added
couple.
together everything that we, above the line and what we brought up, and it was 22,600,000, give or take, so.
We'll probably have to do some,
And that didn't include taking anything out for anything.
Okay.
Just,
And I
that's
did
assuming nothing is revenue replacement, that number.
okay.
Not saying we're gonna do that, that's just, I didn't take it out, because I'm not
Right.
sure what to take out, so I didn't wanna only take part out.
Okay.
But is there anything else here, and then you can, anything else on this committee so that we're in the best position for next week to have it in front of us?
no, I'm
All
good.
right, I think that's, we know, I think the rest of us know who to get here and what information everyone wants.
So do I understand it that you want a better description of whether it's new construction or programming, staff person? I sort of have it, but I could elaborate it a little bit
Yeah,
more.
you have most of it already here.
If it means us possibly cutting down some of these larger requests by 100,000 or 200,000 to fit in, you know, somehow to make sure we can fit in everything to, you know, to that, if that number's 19 million something, you know, yeah.
Yeah, but if we're, I think the number is 19 something, and I think we're a little over 23,
A little over 22.6.
22.6, so, I mean, I think you guys made good progress tonight, and
Yeah.
We'll
now
get
it's-
there.
the next meeting will be the hardest one.
Yeah, to dial it all in, so.
We are forgetting, you know, the thing that we're not talking about, though, that we know that there's going to be.
Vicki, we
part of
know
it
there
That we
is.
have to move it in, so I'm coming up with slightly different numbers.
Well, that's what we're gonna.
Slightly better numbers, right?
Slightly better numbers, yes. I'm coming up that we're really, really close.
Good.
Yeah, and that doesn't even address some of that moving around.
We'll talk about that next
But we
week.
won't talk about it. We're very close.
We
We're
need to
very
do
close.
public comment too.
Yes,
Can I
absolutely.
add one last thing to this? Is, I will ask also, and I might as well bring it up now, is that this is a lot of money, and I know it was part of ARPA, is that at the minimum, that this money, the construction money it's tied to our county RBO. So, you know, that when the commissioners, you know, I would like to push it, you know, forward to the commissioners with that. And I'll also definitely, you know, on the council that, you know, the RBO is the responsible bidder ordinance that the commissioners had passed and that we use in this county. So that these projects have to follow the county's RBO.
And is that correct, or we have to vote on that, or that's just automatic?
No, I think that'd be
How would that, is
a
that a
thing for
legal
Scott.
question? I mean, is it because it's money that's coming from the county?
It's, at the end of the day, it's still,
Our stuff?
we're still technically spending
Yeah.
it. That's why we're still technically being audited for it.
So I think it automatically would.
Kind of comes attached with that.
Okay.
And I will say, in the final rule, there is a strong preference for responsible bidding and best practices, strong labor.
And just for everyone listening, our responsible bidder ordinance has a different threshold than the standard RBO does. I believe off the top of my head, our is 250,000 is our threshold, and standard is 150, I believe.
Okay. Thank you, sorry.
No.
So any other discussion about the subcommittees before we open it up to the floor?
Maybe. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, there's, so, and it's probably not for me, it's probably for the commissioners, but, the townships, I heard that some of the townships aren't taking their money, they don't wanna deal with it.
What?
And if that's true, you know, it's money that we allocated already to the townships, and it was divided by population of those townships. And I've heard, and maybe I'm wrong, some of those townships don't want to deal with the reporting, don't want it. My suggestion would be to the commissioners to don't bring it back to the big pot, just reallocate it to the townships that want it, you know?
And
If
put
that's
the ones
true.
that don't want it on blast, why they're not taking money that's given to them.
They,
If it's
we have
true.
approved it for any government
So-
service use.
So to be clear, originally,
Within ARPA.
the original ARP ordinance that awarded $500,000 to the trustees on a population basis was limited to, there wasn't just any, it wasn't any ARP approved use, it was,
For relief.
it was focused into the poor relief, whether it was homeless or behavioral or food pantry type items. The commissioners have since opened that up somewhat, or all the way to the point of any allowed ARP usage, but for revenue replacement.
So is it true, are there townships that don't want to deal with
I
it?
think today, we got our first request for some of that money.
Okay, technically it came in, I believe it was last week, but it's getting through the process. And so today is the first written agreement that you're going to be reviewing.
I don't know.
So-
And we wonder why she's such a good auditor.
And so can I clarify this? We had an informational meeting with the township trustees on June 3rd, and it was to discuss the process. And that's where we were told that some township trustees, because they maybe talked with each other, that they think that there'll be some that will not be asking for this.
And to be clear, the trustee money has been available from the first ARP ordinance. So,
And our thought as commissioners was to get it to the trustees because they are dealing directly with the population
Yeah.
that needs it most.
and I guess last week, we had our first trustee request, and I think that was south of 100, it's less than 15,000 of that,
Yes.
500,000.
Yes.
Now, that may be that particular township's total total allotment due to population, but if I was gonna add a log onto the confusion pile that revenue replacement does, there is about $500,000 and that's been allocated to the trustees that, for several months now, we've only gotten one person so far putting the paperwork together to get the money, so.
But we did just approve the expanded use last
Yeah.
month. The month
It's
before.
Vicky, nobody wants to be audited by Vicky. Or trustees are scared to come in.
Well,
It is scary.
imagine how happy the elected officials would be in 2024 if we had to start writing checks back to the
Oh,
treasurer.
goodness.
Correct,
So,
correct.
So I'm sorry, thank you.
Okay, so, should I bring up the other requests from the townships? That they did want that other category,
Oh, the
but
revenue
that's something to,
replacement?
yes, that's to be presented to the
Bring up
commissioners.
whatever you want.
All right, did you say public
I do
comment?
think that there's another township that is getting very close to getting everything in order because they inquired about it, so. So if there are no other subcommittee discussions, then the next agenda item is to open it up to the floor for public comment. So if anyone wants to come up and say, okay, yes.
I'm Ruth Vance. I was a citizen member of the subcommittee on the nonprofits and small employers. And I think you kind of already discussed this, but I had made notes that I wanted to mention. So I'll just go ahead and you can stop me if I'm redundant. But first, a couple of questions. Will you put that PowerPoint that you did at the beginning of the program online so we can see that, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And then will you also have the schedule or whatever it is you prepared that you were looking at tonight? You put that online so we can see like the asks and where the lines were drawn and all that stuff that we were talking, because it's kind of hard to know what you're talking about when you can't look at it. Okay, thank you. And then
I can just drop them all.
I just think that
Passed.
it is a good idea to double check, at least for my committee. I know that there were already a lot of building contracts and stuff allocated or done, you know, already, like they're ready to go on their projects. And I think everybody said they take less money, but I think it's a good idea that you are going to look and see what's a project and what's a contract for building or something like that, to see if they really could take less. But a lot of these, especially I think the bigger asks, some of the bigger ones, you know, they have other sources of funding too. So even if they don't get, even if we've reduced it or they've reduced their ask, they may still have money to be able to do what they want to do if they get less. So that might be something you want to ask them and find out that information. You know, there were a lot of smaller nonprofits and employers that they only asked for a small amount of money. So I'm just kind of hoping that if you can free up some of those huge asks, like I think you were talking about, to give less, then maybe you could bring some people that only want $10,000 or $40,000. You could help them out too, instead of just putting them below the line and they don't come up. Okay?
I have one question for you
Yes.
while you're up there. I know when we put out some kind of guidelines for the subcommittees, we talked about asking each of these asks if they had other funds.
Yes.
Did you guys get answers to that?
Yeah, we did find out some, you know, if they were fundraising. I mean, fundraising is iffy, you know, if they're going to get donations. Some of them had commitments from other places, and they could tell us that. You know, others didn't, but they had some ideas for fundraising. So, you know, though that's kind of squishy information depending on which nonprofit you're talking about.
Okay.
But, you know, maybe if I had my huge file that was like this thick with me, I could call through it, but it might be best to actually go to the person at that nonprofit.
Now, we put a lot of
and
trust
ask
in you.
them.
That'd be a lot of work
But-
if we had to touch base.
Well, okay, but I mean, I'll help you as much as I can. If you have questions, you can contact me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the members like you and you for being on these committees. I know it was a lot of work.
And coming tonight. Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
I had great members on my committee as well.
Okay, we have none.
My name is Walt Berninger. I just wanted to thank you all for working so hard on all this. As a minor point, I'd like to point out that when Andy and Jeremy speak, I can hear and understand every single word, and the rest of you, as we worked our way down the line, sometimes only a small percentage of it coming through. If you speak into the mic, I think that would help everybody understand a lot more of your points. But thank you very much for your hard work, especially Vicki.
Oh,
Hey, that new AV system,
We need a new AV.
that new AV system will fix that.
There you go.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to address the group?
That wants to compliment Vicki?
everybody loves Vicky.
Thank you, Vicki.
Well, if there's no other further comments, then this meeting will be adjourned until next week. Same place, same time. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Thanks.